Will the real Henry Gale please stand up? Many questions have been asked about what happened to the real Henry, and the truth is, there are no concrete answers. All we know for sure is that he came to the island in a hot air balloon, and survived long enough to write a note to his wife Jennifer before being killed from a broken neck. And then he was buried. We know Henry crashed on the island sometime between 2003 and 2004 due to the dollar bill in his wallet with a serial number which proves that it was issued on October 9th, 2003. Now that's attention to detail. Another interesting detail is that the balloon appears to be sponsored by none other than Widmore Labs. Now, based on his note, it seems apparent that Henry Gale was not a direct agent of Widmore, at least no more than you would consider Desmond Hume to be an agent of Widmore. But Widmore was clearly sponsoring various air and sea activities in the hopes of tracking down the island once again. After all, he knew that it was his destiny to find the island at some point, due to the fact that his own son Daniel Faraday had to get sent there in order to go back in time. Every single thing that Widmore sent out in search was part of that fishing expedition to see if the time was right to send the freighter. We can also assume that all of the boats in Widmore's solo boat race around the world were also affixed with transponders or GPS. Of course, once these modes of transportation cross the snow globe barrier, their signals either get scrambled or jammed. So, how do we know that Henry Gale was legitimate? Well, Henry writes to his wife Jennifer on the bill that he was ballooning across the ocean as part of his own explorations and adventures. He could possibly be a colleague of Charles Widmore or part of his general business interests. There is no indication, however, that his motives were nefarious in nature, but the branding of Widmore Labs on his balloon is likely what got Henry killed by the others. In fact, it's incredibly likely that he was interrogated as to his connection to Charles Widmore, and he told his captors his entire life story in quite a bit of detail, simply to prove that he was not some kind of a spy, and the details of his story would later prove very useful to Ben. After the real Henry's interrogation, the order was given for him to be killed. We can assume that Ben gave this order. He might have believed Henry's story, but the man's connection to Widmore sealed his fate regardless. The aspect of Henry's death that is strange, and has become a talking point, is the fact that he was buried. Whoever dug this grave did so with a degree of respect, since they gave him a cross headstone. This is unlikely to have been the person who killed him. As we know, the others are not prone to burying people in general, with the key exception of Alex, who was hastily buried by Richard Alpert where she was slain in the barracks. Otherwise, the others tend to burn their own dead, as indicated by Colleen Pickett's funeral, and they show very little reverence or respect to the bodies of their enemies, such as the mass grave of the Dharma Initiative members. So, who buried Henry Gale? There are several possibilities that are quite often discussed. The first is that someone from the hatch, such as Desmond or Kelvin, buried him. However, would either man have ventured out that far from the hatch to the balloon site? Saeed, Ana Lucia and Charlie had to walk very far to find it. It took them over a day as we see them camp for the night, and even if Kelvin or Desmond had come across Henry's body, would either man have really been motivated to bury him, especially if they were on the clock? Another more likely theory is that Danielle Rousseau happened upon Henry's corpse whilst moving camp after meeting Saeed for the first time. Perhaps she took pity on the unclaimed dead man and decided to bury him. Whether or not she bothered to check his ID is a lingering question. If she did, then it might explain why she was so certain that Ben was lying. We know that Danielle did not fully recognise Ben as the man who kidnapped her daughter. At the time, he was younger and hidden in shadow, and he was seen through the eyes of a traumatised, emotionally anguished woman. Yet she seems so certain of his deception in Season 2, Episode 1 of Them, when she tells Saeed,
"He is one of them."
And she was right. So, either she was the one who buried Henry, or she had a strange feeling of familiarity with Ben, for reasons she could not fully articulate based on their previous meeting.
She will lie. For a long time, she will lie.
The other possibility, and one that this channel finds to be the cleanest explanation, is that Henry was killed by Ben's henchmen, someone like Goodwin Stanhope or Danny Pickett. And this might have happened in the presence of Alex and Carl. The body was left, but perhaps Alex insisted that she and Carl go back to bury the man and give him some dignity in death. The reason why I mention this is because we know that Alex was rebelling against Ben's orders and the ways of her people, right from when we first meet her. So it would make sense that she would feel compassion for the murder of an innocent man who had been left to rot in this clearing. The irony being that she did not realise that by burying Henry Gale with his wallet, that she would be inadvertently exposing her own father's lies several months down the line. So the solution to this mystery is really twofold. After being interrogated, Ben ordered Henry's execution. Henry's neck was broken by someone like Goodwin or Danny. His body was left behind, and then someone else, most likely Alex or Carl or Alex and Carl together, returned to bury the man's body. In a nutshell, Henry was killed and buried by completely different people. The Henry Gale story raises another question often asked by fans. Did Ben get caught on purpose? Well, let's think about this logically. If getting caught in the trap was all part of Ben's plan, then he was taking a very large risk, because there was no way he could know that Rousseau, after finding him in the net, would hand him over to Saeed. As far as Ben is concerned, Rousseau is more likely to torture him as to the whereabouts of Alex. After all, she did this to Saeed merely several weeks prior. Ben would simply be offering himself up to this crazy woman in the jungle who captures, tortures, and kills his kind. He has no reason to think the meeting would go any other way. So, logic dictates that this was not the plan at all. In fact, it's far more plausible that Ben was on his way back from the Pearl Station after watching the feed from the Swan. We know he had been observing our losties in the hatch, studying their group dynamics and plotting his scheme to manipulate the very good Dr. Jack Shepherd. But after leaving the Pearl and on his way to a rendezvous point somewhere, he walked right into a snare. It was an accident. And Ben panicked as a result of being caught.
My name is Henry Gale. I'm from Minnesota.
Now, Ben does make some claims as to what his original intentions were. In Season 2 episode 2 for the Road, Ben tells Locke the following.
I failed my mission.
What mission?
When that woman caught me in her trap, I was on my way here, John. I was coming for you.
The problem with this story is, we know that Ben is threatened by Locke's very presence on the island, and we know he's aware that his people have a keen interest in this man. After all, Locke was in a wheelchair for 4 years, but now he can miraculously walk again.
Because when word got back here that there was a man with a broken spine on the plane who could suddenly walk again, well, people here began to get very excited because that could only happen to someone who was extremely special. But Ben doesn't want anyone to think you're special, John.
Richard Alpert knows the full story, that Locke is predestined to become the leader of the others, having encountered him in 1954. While Ben might not know this information, it doesn't change the fact that he senses change is upon the others, and Ben is also acutely aware that his tumour, coinciding with Locke's arrival, could well be interpreted as a sign from the island that his time has come to an end. So it's unlikely that Ben was on his way to retrieve Locke. During his time in the hatch, Ben actually goes out of his way to undermine Locke and make him doubt his faith every chance he gets. So, could it be that Ben was actually on his way to the Oceanic camp for someone else? Maybe he was on his way there for Jack? We know that he wants the Doctor to perform the surgery, but would this really have been the most effective way of going about it? Could Ben have simply shown up at their beach and somehow convinced Jack to come with him to Hydra Island to do this surgery? It seems too far-fetched to be believable, and we know that Ben would rather lie than tell the truth. In all honesty, which is something that Ben isn't known for, he probably wasn't heading to the beach at all. This was just something that he told Locke. One lie of many lies that he told during his time in the hatch. Yes, I know that Ben claims that he always has a plan, but the truth is his plans seldom ever go to, well, plan.
Hey, all right. James, listen to me, please. What? They're all dead. So if you want to kill her, go ahead and do it.
I always have a plan.
You get my point. Ben lies his way through his conflicts and his problems until he sees an opportunity that he can exploit for his own gain. His time as a prisoner in the hatch was never part of the plan, and we see this is the case when his people get wind of his imprisonment. We see B. Clue task Michael with instigating a jailbreak. This is all improvisation.
There's been a development since you came here, Michael. One of our people was captured by yours.
So go get him back.
We can't do that. But you can.
If it was always Ben's intention to get caught, then the others would not need to scramble together a last-minute plan using Michael to get him back. It is this channel's assessment that it was never Ben's intention to get caught by Rousseau's trap, nor was it his objective to make contact with the Oceanic Beach camp. When Rousseau happens upon him, she senses something familiar about Ben, but she can't put her finger on it. 16 years ago she saw the man in shadow and through bleary eyes in the middle of the night, at the peak of her mental unravelling. Her memory of those early days are later proven to be unreliable and confused. And once he was in that net, Ben did what he always does. He lies, and he improvises by using Henry Gale as a cover story. Rousseau doesn't buy it, but she also recognises that the last time she strapped someone down and tortured them, she turned out to have an innocent man. So, rather than make the same mistake again, she goes to that same man for help. Because Saeed used to interrogate and torture for a living. If anyone could get the truth out of Ben, it was going to be him. Ben's cover story was fairly solid, as he knew all the details that he needed to know in order to confidently take on the identity of Henry Gale. There was even a balloon and a grave to support his story. But, unfortunately for Ben, there is no way he could have predicted that by using this seemingly disconnected story of Henry Gale, that it would lead to Saeed digging up that man's grave. I mean, who does that? One of the interesting subtextual readings of Henry Gale's story is that it is one of the show's many references to the Wizard of Oz. The name Henry Gale is the character name of Dorothy Gale's uncle, and if you recall, the Wizard of Oz also featured a balloon prominently within its narrative. Oz is a magical place that people get whisked off to, often against their will, and they find themselves facing all kinds of magic, monsters, and myth when they arrive, a lot like our island. Ben is later linked to the Wizard of Oz once again in the Season 3 episode, The Man Behind the Curtain. Now that episode title is a direct reference to the great and powerful Oz himself, who pretends to be an all-knowing god amongst men, but is later exposed to be nothing more than a fallible human man himself.
You are the man behind the curtain. The Wizard of Oz.
And of course, the Season 4 finale is named after one of the film's most famous lines.
There's no place like home.
The writer's use of these references are to draw a connection between The Wizard of Oz and Lost. It's essentially a code for saying to the audience, yes, there is real magic and sorcery on this island, but that doesn't always mean you can trust everything you're told or believe everything that you see. As for the real Henry Gale, his life came to a sudden and brutal end at the hands of the others. Now there is no question in my mind that his death was the result of Ben's orders, and that Ben's orders were the result of an ongoing power struggle between Ben and the former island leader, Charles Widmore. So maybe it's poetic justice that, in death, Henry wreaks a sort of posthumous vengeance upon the man who cut his life cruelly short. In Lost, karma quite often comes back around, and for Ben, we know that he is only just starting to pay the price for his past actions, and in a big way, it's all thanks to Henry Gale. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to keep this channel alive. You can follow the links in the description to donate to the Patreon and join the rest of us on the island. And until the next time, stay lost.